Divij, given that, you've got a very, very acrimonious atmosphere at this time between Twitter and the government. Twitter has come out with a statement today, a very plain, simple statement saying that this was about a copyright complaint and we responded to that. Can what happened today, I mean, this issue has become a much more explosive, emotive issue because we're talking about the IT minister. And as Ms. Napinai said, I mean, she says Twitter couldn't have shown worse judgment in what it has done. But can we see this action by Twitter as separate from the larger crossfire that we're seeing happen between the government and Twitter? Or is it something completely separate? Because Amit makes a good point when he says that we don't even know what that content is that this complaint was about.
Thank you, Shiv. And I'll just start with an anecdote. In 2018, I received a very similar notice. I edit a blog called Spicy IP, which, funnily enough, talks about copyright law reform. And a major music label in India sent us a takedown notice under the DMCA. And we took them on. We published, and it was international news at that point about the stupidity of this company and the tech platform of trying to take down a copyright law reform website. But the problem, I think, the larger scheme of things, I don't think that this is a conspiracy against India or a conspiracy against the IT minister. The problem is the kind of arbitrariness of private censorship that's built into laws around the world, right? So the DMCA has been criticized for years about how arbitrary it is, how it allows for private censorship and how it allows big tech to kind of regulate our speech without any accountability or without transparency. Now, the interesting thing is that our own laws also have started now promoting that. So the IT guidelines, when they require particular kinds of takedowns, whether from private parties or whether from the government, encourage this kind of discretionary behavior. And they also discourage transparency. So if you look back at the laws, there are parts of the law which don't allow Twitter to make public the reasons for takedowns, right? Especially when it's a government takedown, Twitter can't disclose it to me. So if you want disclosure, I mean, I would say that in the larger context, there are failures of transparency and accountability both by the government as well as by big tech platforms. And I think a lot of that stems from the kind of regulatory design that we have, which encourages government discretion. It encourages private censorship in many ways. And it therefore ultimately leads to the kinds of, abuses of power that we're seeing, these kinds of political battles where the government is, often trying to get Twitter to comply with its ideological agenda in a manner that's not really consistent with constitutional principles or with the rule of law. And when you just have everybody, being able to exercise discretion and arbitrary power over each other. This is the kind
so you're saying the application of arbitrary power and selectivity is coming from both sides. Amit, you want to answer that?
Look, I'm very clear that India has its constitutional framework, free speech, and the limits of it have been defined in Article 19 and 19(2). Every agency or any private entity that operates here in this country has to abide by that. If there are infringements, then there are courts in our country. There's a proper, well laid out judicial process, and everybody must follow that. We don't want people to sit in judgment of what I should be saying, what my political beliefs should be, and how I express them. There are certain no-go areas that the government has very clearly defined, and I explained that, and they revolve around pornography and terror and law and order. The government and its guidelines is also very clear about it. And therefore, let's not get into a situation where we create extrajudicial enterprises who do what they feel like, which is often in violation of the law of the land, because sensitivities in every country are different. To give you an example, Uncle Tom could be a racist slur in America, but in India, that word may be used in a completely different context. How do you expect Twitter sitting somewhere, in America or any other part of the world to be aware of the sensibilities here? That's point number one. And secondly, let's be clear that you cannot be a publisher, you cannot be editorializing content and seek protection under the intermediary law. If you are the intermediary or if you intend to be one, then behave like one. Don't tell me how to write my English and what and how I should communicate an idea or a thought. That is for the people to decide and react to.
Okay.
Clearly, in any society, a communication that is not up to mark will not find resonance.
Okay.
And
Okay.
social media companies have to realize this, that they can't play big daddies.